Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the 2025 Conservation Research Program Final Student Research Presentations. My name is Erica Garud, and I'm the Director of Research for the Institute for Integrative Conservation, or the IIC, as you'll hear a lot today. And it is my honor to be the in-person moderator for today's program. And I'm joined here today by my new colleague, Dr. Richard Boyachi, who's the IIC's new Research Program Manager, who, along with our faculty director, Dr. John Swaddle, will be your Zoom host. It has been our pleasure to get to work with this cohort of William & Mary students to complete applied research and to build their capacities as conservation leaders this year. Today, we'll hear stories of how William & Mary students and faculty from across the university are working with external partners and students from partnering academic institutions to contribute to solutions to some of the world's most pressing environmental challenges through our 2025 conservation research. We're all here today because we recognize the vital connections between our environment and human well-being. And in the face of rapid species loss, climate change, environmental degradation, and injustice, it's essential that we come together and build bridges across sectors, disciplines, and among communities to tackle these challenges. William & Mary is ready to take on this ambitious call to action. The Institute for Integrative Conservation, established in 2020, thanks to a generous alumna who recognized the opportunity for William & Mary to build partnerships in conservation. Our mission at the IIC is to empower an inclusive community of leaders who can deliver timely and innovative solutions for the world's most pressing challenges. We seek to co-design research projects in collaboration with external conservation partners to support their conservation goals. And together we take an integrative approach to conservation, exploring the linkages between biodiversity, human communities, and well-being. The IIC's Conservation Research Program is one of our key strategies for realizing this mission. The year-long program matches William & Mary undergraduate students from across majors, local students from areas where the conservation work is being done, William & Mary faculty from across our various schools and departments, and external conservation organizations who work together to complete applied research that's proposed by our external partners as needed to advance their conservation outcomes. Last spring, the students developed a research proposal in collaboration with their partners. They completed the research full-time over the summer and are now busy analyzing their results and will complete deliverables that were defined by their external partners. And it is through this collaboration on applied research that we aim to support real-world conservation solutions, as well as nurture the next generation of compassionate and effective conservation leaders. This year, we have 33 undergraduate students from William & Mary from across all majors. We have 10 young professionals or students from the areas where the conservation work is being done, 17 faculty mentors from across various William & Mary departments and schools, and 25 external conservation partners who have all worked together to complete 17 applied research projects. We're going to be here for a while today. These interdisciplinary teams tackle a diverse range of projects spanning the natural and social sciences, as well as the humanities. Today, you'll have an opportunity to hear some of their preliminary findings. We have so many incredible stories from the student research this year that we had to divide up the presentations into a morning and afternoon session. This morning, we'll have 9 presentations, which really includes most of our international projects, so that our partners who are joining us from different time zones join us via Zoom. And this afternoon, from around 2 to 3:30, we will have 8 presentations for mostly our domestic projects. And after the presentations, we invite you to join a reception. We'll have lots of good food just out here in the work cafe. After each student presentation, I've asked their conservation partners to provide a very brief reflection on the important work that our students have been a part of. Today, we have a Zoom and an in-person audience. The presentations will be recorded and available on the IIC YouTube page. And since we have so many presentations, we're asking you to hold your questions for the students for the reception this afternoon. But if you're joining us via Zoom, you can feel free to type your questions in the chat, and we'll share those questions with students at the reception or after their presentation. Before we begin, I want to express my gratitude to all of our amazing external conservation partners for inviting William and Mary to collaborate in your important work. Thank you for mentoring the students in the research and helping them explore careers in conservation. I'd also like to thank our incredible faculty mentors for guiding the students through the research process. I'd especially like to thank Camille Andrews, who is our William and Mary Research Librarian and also a mentor on one of the projects, for her invaluable support of the students through the research process. I'd also like to especially thank the entire IIC team. I'd like to thank my new colleague and partner in crime, Richard Baiocchi, for all of his hard work, and want to welcome him as a member of our CRP team. And especially want to thank Kathy Francillo for all of her essential work on all the budgets, travel logistics, everything that made everything here you're seeing today possible. I want to thank the students for all of your hard work, for bringing a lot of joy and fun to these projects, and for your commitment to learn. And I'd like to thank the broader IIC community of alumni, partners, community members, faculty, and students who have made this program. And thank you all for being here today and being a part of our incredible IIC. So to begin the presentations, I'd like to invite Dr. Sapana Lohani, who's our geospatial data scientist and one of the mentors on, I don't even know, 4 or 5 projects here that you're here today. She's going to read the William Mary Land Acknowledgement and introduce the first student.
William and Mary acknowledges the indigenous peoples who are the original inhabitants of the lands our campus is on today. Chiran Haka Motorway, Chika Hamani, Eastern Chika Hamani, Natapanai, Monacan, Lansaman, Waterway, Commonwealth, Pataomic, Upper Natapanai, and Ratapanak tribes, and pay our respect to their tribal members, past and present. With this, it is my pleasure to welcome Helen Tiffin and Saoirse Dowd to the podium. They work alongside the Conservation through Public Health CTPH, Makerere University, and with Professor Scott Ickes, Professor Heather Broughton, and myself to conduct a research exploring waterborne disease transmission between livestock, humans, and gorillas in Burundi, Uganda.
We make eye contact with the mountain gorilla, as Helen and I did in the remote forest in Uganda. You'll be struck by their human-like eyes, their eyes, their hands and feet, their playfulness and sweet behavior, even their unique abilities, are all evidence of them being one of our closest ancestors. We share 98% of our DNA with mountain gorillas, but this is also one of the reasons why they're unique. I'm Saoirse Dowd. I'm Helen Tiffin. We traveled to Uganda to conduct a research project on zoonotic disease transmission between humans and animals around shared water courses and how this transmission affects public health and global health. This interconnectedness that Saoirse talked about comes at a cost. Yes, gorillas are some of our closest animal cousins, but this genetic similarity allows for diseases to be spread easily between humans and gorillas. The specific disease we studied here over the summer for our research is cryptosporidium, which is a zoonotic waterborne parasite that is responsible for taking the lives of over 100,000 people every single year. Our research took a multifaceted approach where we teased out how water sources can be used to facilitate disease between gorillas, livestock, and human communities. We worked in conjunction with 2 students from Makerere University in Uganda, Mary and Stephen. And we each took a different section of this project. And talking about human communities in particular, these are often those with limited water and resources to sanitation and hygiene access. and are often some of the most marginalized communities who can bear the burden of this disease.
To tackle this problem, we work with Conservation for Public Health, or CCPH. CCPH is a Ugandan NGO that takes a One Health approach to conserve biodiversity. Their One Health approach is the idea that human, animals, and environmental health is all interconnected. Our project aligns with their One Health approach because we're looking at how disease transmits between humans and animals through shared water. We approach this problem for a few different levels. First, we need to identify how animals affect zoonotic disease transmission. To do so, we want to identify the prevalence and burden of Cryptosporidium in both livestock and rural. Then we want to understand how humans use water resources and how they might be at increased risk with the disease. Finally, we want to combine all of these factors into a hotspot map that will show which communities are more vulnerable, where disease is occurring, and also areas that might be good for transmission mitigation.
For our methodology, we surveyed over 100 people from 5 different study villages, and we asked them questions regarding water, sanitation, water inequality, access, getting at their perceptions of disease spread between gorillas and humans, and how their water access affects them. For fecal samples, we took samples from 175 livestock species, sheep, cows, and goats, from, again, these same study villages. This was done invasively and non-invasively. And for gorillas, we sampled from 4 different mountain gorilla groups within the forest, totaling 36 individuals. For water samples, we chose 30 water sources from village surface water sites, but then also sites that transferred water between human and the forest communities back in. We found that gorillas have the highest proportion of Cryptosporidium presence, followed by our livestock species and then water. In breaking down the gorilla burden even further, we can see that none of the 4 groups we surveyed have less than half negative, with Rishigura and Katwe being. For more statistical power, we used a generalized linear models to account for non-normality of the data, and found an R-scores value of 0.78. A strong exponent. This looked at gorilla group versus Cryptosporidium cysts per gram for our fast acid stain slides. And we compared Benindo to Habanyanja, and that found no statistics. But Hatwe roughly doubles the mean cyst burden as Benindo, and Rishigura found 3.5 times the cyst burden of both Benindo and Habanyanja, meaning that Hatwe and Rishigura were statistically. Applying our GLM to our livestock species by proximity, so this was closest livestock herd to our closest predator group, we found no statistical significance for cattle or sheep, which is surprising as cattle is typically that poster child for Cryptosporidium. But we did see that goat parasite burdens did vary depending on which gorilla group they were in close proximity with. And so we found an R-squares value of 0.64. And that goats, specifically near Rishigura, had a 6-fold higher cyst burden than those in women. So for implications, again, this is surprising as cattle are normally more associated with crypto, but within the context of the community, makes more sense. This can make more sense as those are kept in this higher density situation, and are often fed directly on the ground, like in these pictures, where they're able to reseed crypto through this fecal oil route directly. Cryptosporidium also thrives in this more damp wooded environment, allowing this to continue on in the goat population. So some possible solutions, depending on the community context and what we exist for them, could include clearing the pen avoid directly feeding on the ground, and they could switch to a less intensive passing situation, or they could rotate pastures with an incompetent species like swine or poultry that would less facilitate this. They could also clean pens with undiluted iodine if there is an absence. Looking at this data spatially, we can see that there is a trend towards the western side of the map. And each of these are broken down in color by the livestock species or gorilla group, with prevalence being those larger circles. You can see there is less towards that northwest side. And I will pass it on.
In terms of the food, our biggest finding is that 71% of households we surveyed experience moderate to high levels of food. We quantified this using Northwest's water insecurity experiences and found that this is 2 times higher than the national Uganda. Water insecurity eliminates communities' water resource choice. 95% of respondents surveyed said that they could use the water was concerning livestock, gorillas, or both. However, high levels of water insecurity make it nearly impossible to avoid using the extended. This could lead to increased disease transmission and consumption of concerning water. We also found that households that use surface water have higher levels of water insecurity. And 75% of the households who surveyed reported they use surface water as their primary source. Water sources ripe for contamination and disease spread because the same rivers and streams being used by people are also being used by livestock and wildlife. We witnessed cattle and goats walking around and defecating in the same water sources with people collecting. Piped and tap water, which is more consistent with unknown, is very inaccessible and usable. We also found that sanitation and hygiene practices that decrease because of water insecurity. Communities are unable to perform practices such as washing clothes, hands, and body because of inconsistent water sources. This could also increase the risk of disease transmission. Limited water access also leads to tense emotions, such as anger and shame. These emotions affect individuals because it places unnecessary stress on people who are managing households, and this disproportionately affects women who are primarily responsible for collecting and managing the water. Water insecurity, contamination, and sanitation are issues. They affect about half of the world. Water insecurity and contamination may decrease health and increase the risk of disease transmission. Inconsistency of water sources may force people to have to travel farther to collect water, which could increase human animal interfaces and decrease wildlife development through habitat destruction and stress. And finally, water insecurity can also cause instability in economic and social facilities. Time spent collecting water is time spent away from work and daily duties. This responsibility also often falls to children, which can provide educational opportunities and make getting an income very difficult.
We wanted to say thank you to the wonderful IIC and William and Mary mentors, Dr. Scott Ickes, Dr. Sapana Lohani, Dr. Broughton, and Erica Lulu. And we also wanted to thank Mary, and she's a student from Makerere University, the 2 student partners that we worked with this summer.
A big thank you to our partners, Conservation Partners, Dr. Dowd, Dr. Gloria, Gracious and Lawrence, and the entire amazing CeCe staff that really welcomed us and invited us along.
And a huge thank you to the Buffalo community for their hospitality, generosity, and kindness that allowed this research.
Thank you so much, Helen. It's we have this wonderful reflection from Dr. Gladys Kalima Dupusoka from Conservation Through Public Health. We were lucky to get to host her as part of our conservation speaker series about a year ago.
Greetings from Uganda. This is Dr. Gladys Kalima Dupusoka, founder and CEO of Conservation Through Public Health. It was wonderful to be with William and Mary College in 2023. Here with my husband, Lawrence Soka. We really had a great time talking to me and talking about my people in Koreans. We're really excited both William and Mary students here in Uganda and greeting you over the Nepal. It's been a great opportunity to have you over this summer, and it's been even more meaningful that you've been working closely with the students in Makerere University College of Veterinary Medicine. The study that we're doing, looking at water as a source of zoonotic disease transmission, is really going to add to our One Health approach to conservation, that is improving the health of the people, the gorillas and other wildlife and livestock together, as well as the well-being of the local community. We have been studying presence in the mountain gorillas for the past 20 years. And we found that typically the gorillas that range outside the park have a higher parasite value to pick up parasites from the local community and their livestock. But we have not really looked at the local sources and the role of the local sources in maintaining this quality of. So the research that me and Mary students and Makerere University students are doing is really going to help build upon our One Health model and help us to know where we can prevent and control this zoonotic transmission. We often talk to communities about having clean water, drinking from clean water sources, boiling the water, but this will really enable us to have more targeted interventions. We hope to continue to do more of this work together with you, and thank you so much for the great energy you brought to our team. Dr. Gloria Adiko, veterinary officer for CTPH, has been updating me on all that she's been doing, and I think she's really enjoyed working with me very much. And so about team, I'm doing the very evaluation after. We're looking forward to seeing how the project progresses. Thank you very much.
All right, next up, we have Lauren Nash and CeCe Sturman, who worked alongside Robert Dongol, Minjit Debakadari, Ickes Chudal, and Melanie Shaka from Nepal Engineering College, and with support from Dr. Sapana Lohani to explore the impacts and the role of women in water resource management. Million people around the world, are about 2/3 of the entire world's population globally, experience severe water scarcity at least 1 month each year. And 2 billion people around the world live in countries where water sources are inadequate. This shows that water scarcity is clearly on the rise and it's impacting communities everywhere, including Nepal. And then specifically in the Kathmandu Valley, water resources are becoming more scarce as a result of practices such as groundwater extraction and then also the increasing climate change. Unfortunately, especially women who often have to if you're joining via Zoom, please mute yourselves if you can. All right, thank you so much. These impacts will especially affect women who around the world tend to manage the water supply at the household level. And as a result, they have to often walk miles or spend hours in line waiting for water resources. And additionally, women tend to be responsible for cooking, cleaning, and washing, which are all water intensive activities. So
as a result, they feel this burden the greatest. I'm Laura Nash, I'm sitting and we are studying how climate change and commercial groundwater extraction are impacting both water security and gender equality. So to do this, we want to incorporate community perspectives. We feel that it's really important to hear from people who are on the ground and who are witnessing these impacts firsthand to guide solutions in the future. So we conducted conversations with community members, get their point of view, as they're often left out of these discussions. So to do this, I wanted to see how household water use has changed over the last few years of growing levels of scarcity. See people who maybe change what water resources they use, if they maybe use less to conserve water, or if they even use more to disregard scarcity entirely. I also wanted to understand what strategies communities might plan to use or are already using to make groundwater extraction more sustainable. And then lastly, I wanted to understand how changing water access might shift and reinforce the traditional family structures in Nepal. See if women are being disproportionately affected, if the burden that they face at home is maybe worse than normal. To do this, we both interviewed key informants and also surveyed the general public to see how they feel about these issues. And then just some quick background information. In Nepal, there's 4 main water sources. They are tube wells, dug wells, traditional water spouts or quays, and surface water sources. And then my research focuses more on the commercial groundwater extraction side of it. And for commercial groundwater extraction, they use the tube wells primarily. They can either be shallow or deep. So what we found was that water availability and quality have been changing in more recent years, and this is a result of increasing climate change and commercial groundwater extraction, but it's also a result of the Legacy Water Supply Project, which has expanded water access by bringing piped water to like a bunch more households in the Kathmandu Valley. Unfortunately, climate change and commercial groundwater extraction have both negatively impacted water scarcity, though, by decreasing the groundwater level and leading to more unpredictable rainfall, which has provided for more challenges with recharging the water supply. And as you can see here, people generally felt that there have been changes in water quantity and quality as a result of commercial extraction in their area. There's also been a lack of regulation for current extraction processes, and both the communities and the key informants advocate this, saying that regulation of commercial groundwater extractors has not been severe enough, and it maybe needs to be a little bit stricter. And as you can see on this chart too, people generally felt that across all 5 areas that we surveyed, that current water extraction and distribution practices are not sustainable currently. We also found that women are more involved in decision making, and this was true both in informant interviews and in household surveys. Many key informants even said that women's voices might be heard more than others just because they're so involved in the water process at the household level. And so women now are participating in civic society. They're being heard in these discussions, which is really important for furthering these solutions. And as you can see in this chart, most people felt that current water systems actually challenge traditional gender roles rather than reinforce them. And then my deliverable for this project, in addition to being a scientific report, will be a pamphlet that we will pass out to communities and also government officials so that they can understand the work we're doing and how we're trying to help these communities.
Nobody even heard of Roman Methodist, but with our view, we have heard of them. Generations of citizens in the Kathmandu Valley of Nepal have utilized these ancient stone spouts that have resisted for thousands of years. These technologically advanced spouts have survived earthquakes, wars, and yearly monsoons. But they are threatened. They are disappearing, literally. Many of their locations are no longer known. Many of them have dried up. The Monument Act designed to protect them was inadequately maintained. My project is to understand how community and government management work together to protect 80% of local communities said that the government supports and maintains the restoration of their keys in their areas. The government officials we talked to said that they fund projects, provide technical support, and construction. The government says that the funding is not limited and that restoration is done as needed. But many community members have said that this support is inadequate. Of the keys I saw, most needed some level of maintenance, and many of them were completely unusable. The main problem seems to be urbanization. There's no proper scanning done of the ground before a lot of construction of new buildings and hotels. This forces the citizens to turn to groundwater extraction as a sustainable source. The community maintains and the government funds. It's a sentiment I heard over and over. Yet there seems to be a lack of transparency to establish clear goals and expectations. Physical keys are being lost to time and degradation, but so are their histories. There are unique and fascinating stories behind the usage and creation of every single discipline. But unfortunately, many younger generations are becoming less involved. These promote involvement of younger generations while helping the older generations realize the value of their traditional knowledge. My recommendations are as follows. If we use technology in management in order to track which areas are in need of restoration, as well as understanding which canal routes can fund to prevent urbanization problems. We also need to improve communication. Through community involvement, we fund facilitation between younger and older generations, as well as the community and the government. We also must prioritize bottom-up conservation. This will prioritize local needs. It will require more transparency of the government, as well as promoting involvement and empowerment as community in order to manage restoration and budget. There are unique funding opportunities. If we promote ecotourism to visit Ickes or even install plaques with information such as the history and usage information of these cities, more travelers will eat at local shops, shop at local stores, support local businesses, and patronize with local tour guides throughout Kathmandu Valley. The local communities in the Kathmandu Valley of Nepal play a critical role in water management. In one study, we learned that the community needs to maintain involvement in policy making. In our study, we learned that transparent communication is key to improving community management. Do you want to the citizens of the Kathmandu Valley of Nepal, as well as our mentors, Dr. Sapana Lohani and Robert Dongol, and our research partners, Nirjala Bakari, Diksha Chudal, and Milani Shakya. Thank you.
Have a reflection from Robert Dongol from Nepal Engineering College, who might also be joining us at the center recording.
Dear CeCe and Lauren, congratulations on your exceptional work related to the water resources of the Kathmandu Valley. I understand the challenges of stepping outside one's comfort zone, but both of you did an excellent job in learning and immersing yourself in the local tradition and cultures. Though your work may seem separate at first glance, CeCe and Lauren, they are in fact deeply interconnected. Research has shown that the over-extraction of groundwater is a major factor contributing to the depletion of traditional water source spouts in the valley, particularly as cities, traditional stone spouts tap into subsurface water sources. For example, with the introduction of Melamchi water supply system, groundwater extraction has reduced, leading to increase in the number of cities that still yield water. These city structures are a remarkable testament to the ingenuity of our ancestors who, without modern engineering, utilized the knowledge of groundwater system to channel water into the valley from distant sources. They are truly living heritage, and many organizations are working to raise awareness and preserve these invaluable architectural elements. Some traditional spouts have already begun the process of revival, though a significant challenge remains, that is identifying sustainable water sources for these traditional cities. These efforts will need to continue, but before that, it is crucial to educate the people, public, and relevant organizations about the importance of preserving these cities. CeCe's work, in particular, will play a pivotal role in raising awareness and drawing international attention to this living heritage of the valley. Similarly, Lauren's work is also of great significance, focusing on peri-urban water security in the face of climate change and urbanization. Groundwater extraction in peri-urban areas of the valley is reaching alarming levels, threatening the livelihood of the local communities and raising serious concerns about local water security. Lauren's study explores areas of significant groundwater depletion and examines the dynamics of water extraction, as well as policy dimensions and the conflicts and cooperation among various stakeholders. Many different stakeholders are involved in groundwater management, and the cooperation between them is essential for the effective management of our resources. The understanding reflected in Lauren's research will be invaluable for local authorities and community-based organizations as they work to manage these resources more sustainably. I am confident that both of your contributions will have a lasting impact on the valley, not only in terms of conserving traditional water sources, but also in ensuring the broader water security of the region. Thank you.
Next up, we have Ava Fisher and Srija Upadhyay, who's joining us via Zoom. Could you go ahead and unmute? Who worked alongside Rinzan and Chema Lama from Okali, a non-governmental organization in Nepal, and with Dr. Sapana Lohani and me this summer to explore how her perspectives on human-carnivore conflict and mitigation in Humla, Nepal, and the Western United States.
How's the audio? Okay. Pictured here is Lamar Valley in Yellowstone National Park. You can see our conservation partner and I are looking for the speck of a black that others claimed was a wolf, allegedly 400 yards away from us. Despite this distance, we were thrilled to be in the wolf's presence. A few days later, we're sitting down with another interviewee, which is a rancher from a well-respected community. If he spotted a speck of a wolf 400 yards away from his ranch, he would not have had the same reaction as us. He would not have been thrilled. Discrepancies in perceptions and differences such as this is what we explored with our stories throughout the summer in the American West. My name is Srija. And through the partnership of William Mary IIC and the Nepali NGO Ukali, we bring you insights into human-carnivore conflict and its mitigation. Human-carnivore conflict is a global issue that manifests in 4 different ways. Crop raiding by carnivores, property damage, human safety, and livestock depredation. And this last iteration of human-carnivore conflict is what we focused on the most with interviewees this summer. Now that we've established that a variety of human-carnivore conflict exists, let's explore why they occur. Turns out that human-carnivore conflict is inevitable because we share environment and limited resources with them. There's 2 iterations of how this sharing of environment and resources can play out, either in peaceful coexistence or conflict. Generally, the latter occurs when proximity and competition over conflict occurs. Now that we've established that livestock depredations are one iteration of human-carnivore conflict that results from competition over space and resources, let's explore the potential impacts of this. The most evident impact of livestock depredations are financial losses for the rancher from losing one asset, such as a cow. Second is a retaliatory killing of predatory carnivores, which jeopardizes their population status. So think of it as if a gray wolf, which is listed as endangered in many parts of the nation, kills a sheep, and then the gray wolf is killed in retaliation. And third is political polarization between ranchers who respect wildlife and carnivore groups pressuring ranchers to accept carnivores. As you may remember, at the beginning of this presentation, I said that human-carnivore conflict was a global issue, and one of the regions where it manifests is in Humla, Nepal, characterized by high-elevation grasslands and pastoralist goat herding communities. These communities coexist with carnivores such as snow leopards, wolves, and Himalayan black bears. And our partner NGO Ukali works with these communities to mitigate conflict in the face of environmental change. Currently, Ukali is seeking lessons learned from herder and rancher communities around the world to improve their mitigation strategies.
Our research took place in the Southern Rocky Mountain region of the American West, in which ranchers, native communities, and other actors including carnivores, like bears, wolves, and humans. These actors have knowledge around mitigation strategies that may be valuable for our partners in communities. They identified 2 gaps of knowledge that relate to human, livestock, and carnivore space use and climate-related factors. To further break things down, our overarching goal to document perspectives regarding human-carnivore conflict, we sought to determine all influences of conflict, investigate climate-related factors, evaluate how space use is considered, and summarize our findings for communities. We took a 4-step approach, and we are currently undergoing transcriptions and writing. We learned about many of the mitigation strategies that are currently being implemented in the American West, most the most popular being right now flagery, range riding, and livestock handling practices that follow animals for instance. Our first major finding was that conflicts and therefore their solutions are context dependent. Take guardian dogs. One rancher in Colorado claimed that her guardian dog was an essential part to her operation and her success. A rancher in Montana, however, faced many challenges with his guardian dogs as they would get attacked and injured by coyotes and wolves. Additionally, with just this one example of a mitigation strategy, mass implementation cannot be done as issues should be evaluated for a context by context basis. Another key finding from our research is the necessity of involving diverse stakeholders. One rancher we spoke with in Montana dedicates his work to being a facilitator of difficult conversations to cultivate collaboration and common. His vision is not just to have these discussions, but also to figure out how we can all work together. Finding common ground then opens the door to community-led mitigation efforts. Involving stakeholders in all parts of this process allows for a community-based approach, cultivating respect, trust, and collaboration.
Let's return to the research gaps that Ava highlighted at the beginning of this presentation. To answer my question on intersecting space use, we found via our interviews that overlapping space use between human and carnivore actors leads to higher likelihood of conflict. We also found that interviewees may concentrate mitigation measures in these areas.
To answer the question of what are the common climate-associated factors that impact human-carnivore conflict and mitigation efforts, respondents most commonly responded that forage availability, water availability, and variation in snowpack are extreme factors that will change livestock and animal behavior and limit feeding choices. We learned so many lessons from the American West. One of them being that the mitigation strategies that work here need to be tested before being fully implemented. On the screen, there are a variety of research applications we hope to complete, the most important being formation of a global network of information, ideas, and people. We would like to thank our faculty mentors from the IIC, along with our conservation mentors and partners from Lohani and all of the interviewees who make this research possible. One thing. One thing that Shrija and I were surprised with this project that we'd like to leave you with here today is the idea that human-carnivore conflicts are human-driven. The steps to minimizing conflict in all other conservation efforts must have the involvement of humans.
So we have a reflection from Rinzin Lama, who sent this from Western Nepal, remote Western Nepal, so it's a bit windy. But Richard was able to put some captions here. So as you're reading his reflection, also feel free. We have Percy Zimmery and Taylor Hume, who's joining us via recording, who work alongside Jordan Green from Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources and Dr. John Swaddle, as well as many other partners in Virginia, to explore strategies for the mitigation of wildlife vehicle collisions in Loudoun County, Virginia, exploring multi-actor support and soundscapes.
So first, I want to thank you all for coming today. And before I begin, I want you all to think about the last time you saw a road post. For a lot of you, I'm guessing it was pretty recently, and that's what our project aims to address. We worked with the Department of Wildlife Resources on mitigating wildlife vehicle conflict in Loudoun County, Virginia. So our conservation challenge is that increasing habitat fragmentation is leading to high amounts of wildlife vehicle. This includes collisions, near misses, and other negative consequences of interactions between humans and traffic and wildlife. Consequences include harm to wildlife populations, driver safety risks, and financial costs. But mitigation structures such as overpasses, underpasses, and fencing can greatly reduce this issue, reducing patches upwards of 80%. But more needs to be done to actually implement these structures. So Taylor and I took on two angles of this project. Taylor explored the ecological component, where he looked into how wildlife perceives anthropogenic noise and how wildlife crossing structures can affect this. And I looked into how various stakeholders perceive wildlife vehicle conflict and how it can both support for moving forward in the safety process. Our study area was Loudoun County, Virginia, which has the highest rate of wildlife vehicle conflict out of all Virginia counties. So it's a big hotspot for this, which is why we focused our research on this area. So my research question is, how can Virginia organizations build groundswell support to motivate the Virginia Department of Transportation to implement wildlife vehicle conflict mitigation strategies? My objectives were to understand how to address roadblocks, explore strategies for building support, and learn what has led to successful implementation in other states. I followed up on previous student research, where students interviewed several actors involved in the application process, understand the goals, motivations, barriers involved in their organization. So I followed up with a lot of these candidates, and I also broadened my scope and interviewed some new organizations that focus on ecology and transportation. And I analyzed the points from these interviews and connected them to my objectives to create recommendations. So my findings about addressing roadblocks, unsurprisingly, funding was the most commonly mentioned roadblock. And this issue is competing with a lot of other priorities. So one way we can help increase the viability of working on these projects is by providing tangible material, such as prioritizing hotspots and showing data that proves the efficacy of these structures. And there are some gaps in data, including underreported wildlife vehicle conflicts, especially for small animals, because right now this data comes from police reports, which don't capture the full scope of the issue. And what I learned about building support, candidates mostly mentioned that they had seen a positive reception from the public when they brought it up. And they had mixed opinions on the role of public support, but a lot of candidates thought that public support would put pressure on decision makers to focus on this issue more. A lot of candidates agreed that fostering collaboration among organizations is really important. We're already seeing this in Virginia with a collaboration called BizWIC, which brings organizations together to brainstorm solutions. And citizen science can play a role in engaging the public, building awareness, and also filling in some of those gaps in development. Lessons to be learned from other states. It's really important to have a strong relationship between the Department of Transportation and the State Wildlife Agency. And it also helps to have a clear decision-making process that involves multiple actors, so that people interested in solving wildlife vehicle conflicts can have their voice heard during the planning process. And Western states tend to be ahead on this issue because of the presence of migratory species, which has forced them to be more proactive in combating this issue. Eastern states are just now starting to pick up an interest in it, but there are a lot of lessons to be learned from the states who have already gone through the process.
Hi everyone, my name is Taylor and I'm focusing on the ecology angle of addressing this conservation challenge. Our research question asked how the collection of acoustic data and the understanding of traffic noise levels reduce wildlife vehicle conflicts in Loudoun County, Virginia. So I have 4 objectives that will help me answer our research question. My first one is conducting a literature review on what is already known about traffic noise and wildlife and what solutions have been suggested. Most of the literature deems wildlife crossing structures such as bridges and culverts as the most effective at reducing noise levels. Next is studying the relationships between the traffic noise emitted and wildlife that live nearby in Dowd County. To test this, I'll be comparing sound levels near areas with and without bridges or culverts. On top of that, I will also study the relationship of traffic noise and environmental conditions that will be explained later. And for my fourth objective, I will create recommendations on what the next steps should be to improve current crossing structures to decision making. So to achieve my objectives, you may wonder what I did for 10 weeks in the summer. I based my data collection methods on 2 CRP students' research. In 2023, Alexa Busby has identified 10 hotspots of wildlife vehicle conflicts, and in 2024, CRP student Sophia Polite also went back to the same hotspots instead of camera trucks and bridges and culverts. This year, I went back to set 6 of the hotspots to record noises from areas that did and did not have crossing structures, as well as consider other environmental conditions that affect noise levels emitted by traffic, such as vegetation, elevation, and distance. After collecting and analyzing data, I concluded that there are 4 main findings. The first one is that the further we move away from the crossing structure perpendicular to the road, the more noise levels decline. Then this next finding is a little tricky to explain, where there is a steeper decline in noise levels near areas without a crossing structure compared to areas with a bridge or culvert. This supports previous literature on bridges and culverts themselves reduce sound. But to understand how these structures absorb noise, further research is needed to identify other factors that may contribute to the reduction of noise at these infrastructures. A third finding reveals that there's a relationship between the vegetation and bridges and culverts, which means that vegetation density is an effective supplement to reducing noise levels compared with paved infrastructure. Lastly, I did not find a relationship between noise levels and changes in elevation between the landscape and the road. Ultimately, my findings suggest that wildlife are living in habitats with noise levels ranging from 60 to 90 decibels. For humans, is equivalent to the sound of dishwashers to lawnmowers. With the help of vegetation improvement on current infrastructure, we can create safer and quieter clusters for wildlife and better address larger conservation.
So we hope that our research can contribute to the implementation of mitigation structures in Virginia that affects people and wildlife. I want to thank my mentors, Dr. John Swaddle and Jordan Green from the Department of Wildlife Resources, and my research partner, Helen. And I want to thank you all again for coming.
Selection from Jordan Green from Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources. So Jordan, if you're there, if you want to unmute the question.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jordan Green with the Department of Wildlife Resources. I want to express my gratitude to Taylor and Percy for their hard work this year and contributions towards a better coexistence with wildlife. The work they've done regarding wildlife vehicle conflict and the work of the students from the past 2 years simply wouldn't be possible to even attempt without this great partnership between DWR and William & Mary's IIC program. Not only is this about accomplishing the research, it's about what the research has led to. A couple of weeks ago, I had the privilege of attending the first field site visit to investigate potential sites where wildlife fencing might be installed to help funnel wildlife away from roads and cross under them at existing bridges and culverts. This meeting included many staff members from DWR, VDOT, and Loudoun County, and was the culmination of work previously done by IAC student Alexa Busby, Kaylee Santella, and Sophia Polite. The work they've done have helped provide guidance on where and how the $450,000 in state appropriated funds should be spent, and I dare say the work these students have accomplished played a role in the appropriation of these funds. Taylor's work will help tremendously with the next steps in wildlife vehicle conflict mitigation design, and Percy's work will help further Virginia's progress in addressing this critical conservation need. I look forward to what both of these students will accomplish, and I'm honored to have played a role helping them along the way. Thank you.
The longest running mentor. Next up, we have Lindsay Fisher and Kylie Ledford, who work alongside the Battle of Loayuzo development, and with support from Camille Andrews and Dr. Mara DeSenta to explore the linkages between a key apartheid battle, environmental justice, and human health.
chronic battle of the triasim. It is the three elements. The interpretation of us, because most of us into the world, I think that I come into the brain. Because we can have not really soil of incredible outbreak. That's why we try to extract those
What we just heard there is from Mr. Mangalio from Joppa, a community member of Zimbabwe, South Africa, leader of Fold and Liberation Struggle effort. And the picture you see here is of the ruins of the original Joppa family home, which apartheid police forces burned on the day of that battle in January of 1960. Named after that battle, our conservation partner, Battle of Lohani Development, or Fold, takes the historical lessons to move from conflict towards peace and sustainable development. Through this research project, Kylie and I had the opportunity to support that mission through the documentation of community oral history.
In case you're unfamiliar, apartheid essentially means apartness. It was a government and policy that lasted for those years, and it essentially removed non-white South Africans from participating in daily life, such as being excluded from healthcare, being excluded from the economy. Moreover, it moved Black South Africans out of city centers into rural provinces, and it inhibited the development of these rural provinces. And although this period in this government only lasted from those years, which is less than a lifetime, the effects are still very much felt today. More so, we specifically were examining Nash, which is located in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa, which is one of those more rural and more underdeveloped provinces. And then one of the largest challenges there, which Lindsay and I got to experience firsthand, was there is an absolute lack of road infrastructure. There's utter reliance on dirt roads that are poorly maintained, and within that is the inability to access healthcare services because of that. Moreover, there's a lot of local nature reserves in the area. This province encompasses what's called the Wild Coastline, which is entirely beautiful. However, currently citizens can't really use it to promote ecotourism or anything else in the area due to ongoing conflict.
To explore those challenges, we had a lot of help. We have two South African postgrad students there who you can see in some of these pictures back in India. We also worked with the Zimbabwe local municipality and the University of Fort Clare, where we plan to preserve these oral histories in addition to that. But mainly we worked with Fold. And as an organization, they wear many different hats to support sustainable development. From community and environmental health to cultural heritage and youth engagement, no one day ever looks the same for Fold. And while we were there, we had the honor of attending several events, including a youth soccer tournament, a traditional wedding, a battle commemoration event where the deputy president of the country spoke. And all of those initiatives are driven by Fold in the communities of Zimbabwe. But between all of those amazing experiences, we did do research with the objective to conduct oral history interviews focused on community lived experiences and knowledge from the battle and the liberation struggle under apartheid to better understand how those historical legacies shape current challenges. So I took a more environmental lens, looking at the role of the land in those legacies, the impacts on livelihoods, and hopes for a future of environmental justice.
Moreover, I took on a little bit more of a public health lens, and then within that was exploring this interrelationship between past conflicts and current health outcomes, and examining how apartheid continues to impact the health of South Africans. So digging a little bit more into that, we have legacies of injustice related to those apartheid policies, which historically excluded non-white South Africans from accessing healthcare or accessing education to enter the healthcare field. And within that, when we were speaking to community members, is this major concern over the inequitable distribution of disease, specifically pertaining to HIV and tuberculosis, both of which are classified as communicable diseases. But alongside that is the area doesn't necessarily have a strong prevalence of agriculture. And so there's also a need to use these shelf-stable foods that are typically highly processed. So now you're starting to see a dual burden of disease as things like diabetes are on the rise. And then moreover, contained within that is this need for preventative care services in the area. South African healthcare, although it is technically guaranteed to every citizen, it is not necessarily accessible to every citizen. And within that, it is very reactive. I think a great example of this is PEP is more common there. When we actually made it to a clinic, they were talking about how they have PEP, which is post-exposure prophylaxis for HIV. In the US and in Western continents, you may be more familiar with PrEP, which is pre-exposure. And it shows how the South African healthcare system is currently overwhelmed and underfunded and under-resourced to the point where we're having to be more reactive and not focus on preventative care services, which would help equalize this distribution of disease.
And from the environmental lens, a key question that arose for me during these interviews was how the land represents both the historical tool for oppression and an opportunity for justice. So as Kylie mentioned earlier, Mbashe is home to the Oasis Alien Nature Reserve, a marine protected area. But pre-apartheid, the colonial government removed communities from that land to establish the reserve. And community access continues to be limited, requiring permits or supervision. But also something that became apparent through the interviews is how the land supported the fight against oppression. Mr. Jafta, for example, talked about the role of land in the battle, how he used tree twigs and spider webs to see if someone had been through the forest and communicate with his fellow friends. And also how it represents a promise for the future. So something we asked in every oral history interview was, what would you like to see change? And community members brought up ecotourism, agriculture, and of course, wanting increased access to the reserve for livelihoods, which the exhibitions and education.
So then speaking a little bit more on the oral histories that we conducted, we obviously interviewed a lot of different people. No one interview was the same, and they were conducted in all multitudes of places. However, within that, one thing that really stood out to us was the fact that when we were speaking specifically with the veterans, we were speaking with individuals who fought against this oppressionist regime between the ages of 18 to 23, at most around 25. And it really showed and demonstrated the courage and bravery it took to be a part of these liberation movements. Within that, we also were speaking to them, as Lindsay was just speaking about, on what they would like to see, because we realized that a lot of the things that they were promised and what they fought for have not been idolized in South Africa to this day. And so getting to speak to them about what they want to see in future generations was one of the most important and honestly impactful parts of this research.
So you may still be wondering, how do oral histories support conservation and health? No matter where in the world you work for conservation or human health, there will always be a history there, and most likely a complicated history that still impacts how people relate to and understand the land, who has access and who does not. So to support the well-being of people in the planet, it's necessary to understand this, to work towards more justice.
And within that, our partners at Bold, their overall saying is, how do we move from peace to justice and eventually prosperity? This is actually the third installment of a collaboration between Bold and the IIC. And this installation, we're really looking at how we can promote prosperity in the area. And I think as we look towards the future installations, through our conversations with Bold, the community, and the IIC, there's clearly a very immense need for youth engagement, specifically fostering youth to go into fields such as healthcare and agriculture to boost both their livelihood and the community. Moreover, it's that general bolstering of the local economy, which is seen through developing the road infrastructure and also promoting ecotourism in the area, because we truly can attest to how beautiful the area is. And then moreover, is this continuation of these oral histories. So you use past legacies and past conflicts to inform current development so that we ensure that it's sustainable and community built. And on that note, we just want to acknowledge our mentors and the local communities that help support us throughout this.
So, yes, we would like to end by thanking both, specifically Mrs. Drafta and Mr. Drafta. Also would like to thank Dr. Lisa Sangela, who serves on the ICE board, who really developed this relationship with children, as well as Dr. Yabo, who built this partnership that has now been running for 2 years. So both sent this reflection. In August 2025, the Battle of Low Wiseau, we received our 5th group of research students from the ISC. This year, Bold came up with the research topic. As Bold, we revisited our vision for conflict of peace and sustainable development. And we also interrogated the type of legacy we want to leave behind to the people who are in. Working with the Liberation War veterans, there was consensus that we would record, transcribe, edit, and finally archive our history institutions both in the US and in South Africa. Most importantly, we wanted to visit every village to impart the importance of education and the study of natural sciences as the most probable way to conserve our environment while looking for economic beneficiations for the rural Waiusa village. It seemed the team from William and Mary University did not disappoint. Their first point of call was for Mary University in Alice where the information would be archived. It was not easy for them to engage with the veterans immediately by way of interview, but eventually overcame digital guilt. The following interviews proceeded well. Hosting these students have great returns for both, ably engaging academic outsiders who are able to objectively interrogate our aspirations, which are preserving the South African liberation history in the local municipality, developing the people of Lohani to be self-sufficient and able to benefit from their natural resources, parallel to conservation of these natural resources for future generations, intervention to improve the lives of young people throughout sports and education. It is indeed always a pleasure to host the students from William and Mary, as Bold, we wish them the very best along this. Right, next up, we have Skylar Hartgrave, Emma Hugo, and Sharania Dutt, who worked with Amboseli Ecosystem Trust and the South Rift Association of Landowners of Sorello, as well as Cynthia Catito Ilkin, Versi Lushua, Veronica Tente, and with support from Graham Henshaw and Dr. Troy Wahongli, to explore lessons learned from NGOs and local communities on how to balance livelihoods and conservation.
In southern Kenya, the same land that feeds elephants also feeds families. But as droughts intensify and funding shifts, conservation groups face a hard question. How do you protect nature without leaving people behind? Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We're so excited to share our research with you. I'm Emma Hugo.
I'm Sharania Dutt, and I'm Skylar Hartgrave.
We're in Kenya for 6 weeks, researching how livelihood initiatives are being implemented to balance livelihoods and conservation from the perspective of non-governmental organizations and local communities in southern Kenya. We had the opportunity to work with and learn from both the South Rift Association of Landowners and Amboseli Ecosystem Trust to learn from their initiatives. We worked closely with mentors from AET and Sorello, as well as 3 local Kenyan conservation students, Veronica, Cynthia, and Mercy. And with the support from our faculty mentors, Graham Henshaw, from the William Mary Entrepreneurship Center, and Dr. Troy. One of the greatest challenges we face globally is how we balance the livelihoods and well-being of local communities. With the conservation of wildlife and natural resources. And in the face of climate change, land conversion, and other environmental changes, there's a need to explore ways to balance the needs of people and wildlife, because we need each other for our well-being. While in Kenya, we realize there is often a gap in knowledge because different NGOs have a ton of experience and knowledge about how to run livelihood initiatives, but there lacks a space to share these lessons. Shared learning could help everyone improve. So we wanted to create a data collaboration platform that connects NGOs, letting them share insights, comparing results, and learn what strategies work best for long-term conservation success.
So what was the purpose of our research? Our question asked, what influenced livelihood initiatives to have a long-term patient impact within Laura and long-term economic impact inside communities? And the second part of our question was, how can NGOs use data-driven insights they can get in our final report to better their partnerships with the Maasai communities? The breakdown of that question is shown with our 3 objectives. First, we research how NGOs make decisions on livelihood initiatives, not only by working with AET and Savalo throughout our project, but by interviewing additional conservation NGOs for those interviews, we asked, how do you choose communities to work? What's the hope for these environments? Next, we created questionnaires that centered around asking, how do you evaluate success within the initiative? We asked both the NGOs and communities what they believe is a successful initiative. From the community, we got answers like, they're just making enough income to invest in livestock, but NGOs could believe success for their initiatives is the ability to stand on their own without the NGOs. Finally, we emphasize the need to understand the community motivations and participation rates so that we can quantify their buy-in with these projects. So, what was our methodology? Across the South Rift and Amboseli ecosystem, we conducted 37 ethnographic interviews, the divide of which is shown on the board. We had 3 different questionnaires based on whole year interview. So, our key informant interviews were based on the leadership of the Maasai group available that day, and the focus group was the members. And then the NGO key informants are experts on the livelihoods within the NGOs we interviewed. Next, is a spread of photos of the animals we conducted. So on the left side was the 3 photos there are all the same women. They were very strong women with Amboseli because they developed the most initiatives like Beaver, Grass Seed Bank, Cultural Boma, you can see on the top photo. And the top middle was a very secluded group, so they only were involved with the Grass Seed Bank and Kitchen Garden as they worked close to the Beaver market. And then on the side right here, we have a group that only had a kitchen garden because that was the fencing was only built for.
Also, we really wanted to share our 3 main findings that we found throughout our research. The first of which being that effective NGOs co-design initiatives with communities. So there is an alignment between both the management goals and the community priorities. So some NGOs did surveys within the community to identify those major gaps and challenges and implemented initiatives accordingly, which was more effective than maybe just implementing like unpopular initiatives. So for example, if a lot of groups in the area are implementing a beehive project, maybe not putting a beehive project there doesn't split the context. So it gives donors a better idea of what to fund and how to create things. They also consulted community elders, workplace leaders, and those with invested interest and specialized knowledge, as well as NGOs collaborated on initiatives in order to share resources and knowledge to amplify. Also found that women really drove livelihood success through ownership and skill building, because women were able to gain independence through community management and ownership. It was their initiative and they ran it, even if it was supported by the NGO. Women were motivated to enhance their household income and well-being, be able to support their family, as well as gain skills, especially since traditionally it was the men who held these types of roles. And they also gained empowerment and representation through these initiatives. They gained a voice in their community and mitigating challenges. And it was just really wonderful to see. The picture there is showing a grass seed bank that we visited, and the women were weighing the harvest that they had, and it was just really wonderful to see all of the women. We also wanted to share some of our preliminary factors of success that we found, the first being market access. So for initiatives like beadwork, maybe they depend on the tourism market. So they're not that they're able to sell can really depend on the season and how many tourists are there. Versus an initiative like a grass seed bank, which can rely on a local market selling grass to community members for their livestock, or to local NGOs for grass seeds for restoration. So that difference really impacts the success of the initiative. Also, environmental factors, so things like drought and climate change, especially for grass seed banks, which rely so heavily on rainfall, and resource availability. Do these initiatives have, fencing to keep out wildlife? Do they have storage for their harvest? Do they have water? Do they have the capital to invest in their materials, like for beadwork or for equipment and things like that? So those are kind of the 3 main factors. While we were in Kenya, we saw that real change happens when everyone works together. When NGOs and communities plan side by side, projects fit local priorities and last longer. Women's leadership also really stood out to us. Ownership gave them confidence and made their initiatives more sustainable. And lastly, having access to markets keeps these livelihoods growing and adaptable over time. This is Cynthia, one of our partners from the South.
My name is Cynthia Peleken. I work for the Agriculture. And this year, I was able to support the young student. And
That's where we can hear her. We're gonna add captions to that video watch. Yeah. One of them is student researchers.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of our faculty mentors, Erica, Graham Henshaw, and Lohani, as well as our conservation partners, Serralo and AAT, and our translators, Cynthia, Mercy, as well as all the support from IC and the all of you who helped us along the way in our interviews, like the community leaders and women's collectives. We couldn't have done it without us. Thank you so much.
Start with looking at the movement. And work on everything between the movements and the movement. And mission is to maintain a lively, economic landscape for people and wildlife. We work closely targeting livelihoods programs among the women within the landscape. We by training them, we marketplace person basis and marketplace person. We also train them on ensuring that they're able to build market products that can be able to sell in the international market. Conservation builds the network. We also have programs with Instagram restoration programs for graphic plants for women. And we have had research to read them in many sources. We are looking to review our programs and languages. We look forward to see how we can research answer so that we can get our data on to support the life of programs for women within the landscape. Thank you.
We have 3 more presentations, so feel free. I know it's long. If you need to stand up, stretch, you have more classmates to do so. We're gonna stay in Kenya. Next up, we have Stephen Connell and Thomas Solomon, who work with Amboseli Ecosystem Trust, and with support from Dr. Fernando Galeano Rodriguez and me to explore lesson learned for community monitoring of rangelands.
I want you all to visualize an ecosystem. What organisms are you picturing? How are animals and plants interacting with the land? At first, you may have thought of cheetahs and elephants, but how many of you thought about grass? Grass, which sustains all animals living on the land. How many of you thought about the people who help maintain an ecosystem? The people who manage land in times of drought. The people who herd livestock that graze in the grass and who interact with wildlife daily. Our research focuses on this interaction between people, livestock, and grass, specifically in rangeland ecosystems, which are arid areas suitable for grazing or not. My name is Leah, and this is Thomas. We are researching community rangeland management in Amboseli, Kenya.
The Maasai have been stewards of the environment for centuries, living off the land in and around Amboseli, utilizing traditional monitoring methods to rangelands. The Maasai's background in rangeland monitoring and their familiarity positions them as the best group to management of Amboseli's rangelands, as well as teach their techniques such that they may innovate rangeland. Amboseli Ecosystem Trust, AET, is founded to provide a landscape approach to management, maintenance, and restoration of the Amboseli ecosystem through implementing the Amboseli Ecosystem Management Plan. AET collaborates with local government, other NGOs, and the community to pursue the management of a healthy ecosystem and has guided and supported us throughout the research process. In the face of a changing climate in the greater Amboseli ecosystem, grazing committees emerged to manage grazing zones throughout the region. Elected by the community, grazing committees are responsible for monitoring, managing, and protecting their local rangelands and disseminating this information to the communities they represent. The successes and challenges of grazing committees are not widely known, a gap in knowledge we wish to address, as this management structure is new. Though their presence has become an essential cornerstone in
Our overarching research question is, how can we understand and support community engagement to increase rangeland productivity in the facility? Answering this question is important to address the challenge of sustaining pastoralist livelihoods in the face of changing climate and increasing drought. To dive deeper into our research question, we aim to focus on 3 objectives. The first is to identify management priorities, successes, and challenges of the grazing committees, like the one pictured here with your The second is to understand who is performing monitoring techniques and why, like the women here who are collecting seeds as part of seed bank. Finally, our last objective is implementing monitoring and data management techniques used by grazing committees. For example, the technique of measuring grass with a palm hand shown. Our methods for answering this research question were to identify key groups to interview, making sure to hear diverse perspectives. So not only do we want to interview grazing committee members, but also youth and elders like the one shown here, and women and community rangers like shown on the right. We also went on some patrol walks with grazing committee members, as shown in the middle, to see exactly what they're looking at and how they're monitoring.
The main finding of our research was that grazing committees are successfully maintaining rangelands that require adaptation in the face of environmental changes. Grazing committees have seen great success in their management and monitoring, due in large part how much they involve and inform the high investment in the conservation programming. Furthermore, their successes are exemplified by the sheer quantity of grass and cattle, with every zone having enough grass to let them last for months to years. Another success we found was the community's involvement in rangeland degradation prevention, both in managing community responses to degradation threats, as well as personally going to fix the degradation. Pictured here is one of said interventions, a move and up to water degraded.
While grazing committees have been very successful, they're facing new challenges with changing environment and land. One example here is emerging invasive species. The one pictured is called Solanum incanum, which many community members told us was rapidly increasing in the area. And this invasive species in particular can degrade areas where native grasses grow. But invasive species in general aren't necessarily all bad, and there's some nuances. For example, this species here is good for sheep's goat to graze on, but again, it takes away from the grass that cows provide. There was a different invasive species that we heard was popping up there, but it had fruits that were great sources of nutrition for them. So the adaptation that grazing communities can take to combat this new change may not necessarily be as simple as eradicating species, but probably requires further research into the species themselves. Another emerging challenge is changes in water retention. Here is a gully that formed in just 10 years from water. We spoke to community members who said that cows had broken their legs and it prevents movement across the land, as well as preventing water from seeping into the land and letting grasses grow. Gabions, which are structures that distribute water into soil, are a possible solution to this problem, but they take time and money to implement, which isn't always feasible. A next step to address this challenge would be an assessment of where the gabions are most needed, so that the buildings that are in the most crucial areas can be addressed first. Land use change is also providing the need for some adaptation to grazing. Human wildlife conflict is increasing because of the expansion of protected areas like conservancies, which are in very close proximity to communities. So this means that there's increasing predation of livestock, as well as increasing infiltration of wildlife like elephants into water pans, as seen here. An elephant had brought down this tree, getting into the water to get water into the increased discussion between conservancies and community members to be a first step to looking at this conflict and finding solutions. And finally, because the land is now partitioned into grazing zones, grazing community members are now expected to monitor their entire zone And so the vastness of this land is another emerging issue. We interviewed many grazing committee members that said that it wasn't very feasible to monitor the entire land, especially because they're volunteers and there's also danger in wildlife as they monitor. Many of them said that they wanted increased transportation or more motorbikes. And we believe other solutions could include remote sensing and maybe drones step up with monitor. We'd like to acknowledge some of the people that have helped us a lot in this process. So thank you to Erica for always meeting with us, Fernando for always having us see the bigger picture. Dr. Daniel for accompanying us in every possible and welcoming us. Wilson for translating and being our for and Kenneth for being our agent.
54% of the world's land consists of rangelands for the UN environment. And as such, the development and dissemination of strategies from across the world is crucial to the system. Pastoralists want to maintain their livelihoods. And to do that, they need help in rangeland. Current management strategies are working, require support to sustain the success of both. We hope that the work accomplished in Amboseli by these great leaders.
And I just wanted to take this short moment or brief moment to reflect on our partnership with the Uganda University, IIC Center. And I think when we started this partnership almost 2 years ago, IET has actually come a long way to actually benefit from this partnership in terms of student research. That is not like any other research. It's actually a unique research that is guided by our strategic goals. So actually the ultimate product will actually help AET in decision making as we really work around to navigate the challenges that we experience as a landscape. Therefore, for this year, we have two student research groups. One that was working on rangeland or looking into rangeland management, especially as the focuses on grazing management, with an objective to look pastoralism actually in terms of sustainability for livestock as a way of life for the Maasai. And also, we know pastoralism is also another extension of an olive branch to a survival of life in the landscape. We also had another group that was looking into community livelihoods, strategies being used by different partners within the landscape, each one of them. So it's actually a way that we need to see whether we can bring an basic approach and see whether these are people driven or actually informed by the people on how issues or these issues are going to be tackled. We cannot really talk about conservation without talking about people livelihoods or also community livelihoods. This year's focus was actually on women. We're looking into the issues around women. I mean, the work on around women. What strategies are being used to see how we can? AET wants to see within our long quest to bring women to speed within the conservation space. We are looking into how we can actually enhance inclusion and empowerment for women, not just to be passive participants, but actually to be a voice, an active voice, and also to ensure that there's an improvement in household income that is actually women-centered, actually looking into women to close the gap that has been so big, especially when you talk about conservation issues. It's normally maybe the male actually for male, male are actually the one driving it, but we want to bring everybody, the youth, the women, and all of us into this agenda. So I appreciate the research done by IIC. I want to extend our gratitude on behalf of the Trust Director Jefferson Mato, that we do appreciate and we really look into how we can actually strengthen this going forward. Thank you.
We have two more presentations. Next up, we have Charlotte Toomey, who worked with the Center for Sustainability and faculty in Solutions from Broughton State University, and with support from Dr. Sapana Lohani and Dr. John Swaddle to explore how biodiversity monitoring or community lobbying in the coast.
Have you heard of the last frontier? Well, Palawan, an island in the Philippines, is considered this for its biodiversity and its global importance. Documenting Palawan's biodiversity is key in supporting the work of local and indigenous communities who protect and rely on this biodiversity. As we just saw, there are many faces of the last frontier, including local communities, conservation experts, student researchers, and important biodiversity. I'm Charlotte Toomey. And I'm Lydia Slater. For our research project, we went on camera trap expeditions to collect data on mammalian diversity in southern Palawan, partnered with the Center for Sustainability Creation and students from Palawan State University. Across all continents, even here in North America, biodiversity is being threatened at unprecedented rates. Due to a myriad of reasons, including resource exploitation, mining, and a lack of supportive policy. This is particularly impactful in the Philippines because of their incredible biodiversity. For example, here is an image of a mining project and its destruction. Philippines contains more endemic species per unit area than any other country in the world. The term endemic means that species are native to the Philippines and cannot be found anywhere else in the world. Once they're gone in the Philippines, they will be gone for good. Not only is protecting biodiversity important due to the inherent value of wildlife, but biodiversity is needed for sustaining ecosystem services such as climate regulation and clean water, services which we rely on every day. Local indigenous communities also rely directly on biodiversity to sustain their livelihoods. Supporting community-led conservation efforts is particularly important in the Philippines that has 10 to 20% of their population as indigenous peoples. The Center for Sustainability is a female-led organization that works to pioneer local biodiversity assessments and lobbies the Philippine government for the establishment of conservation areas on behalf of indigenous and local communities. This summer, our team collaborated with the Center for Sustainability to support their conservation work in Silky Speak, Palawan, a region which is home to several indigenous communities. The main goal of our project is to support local and indigenous efforts to protect this land from invasive mining procedures. So our project had 3 key objectives. First, we collected raw biodiversity data from 12 camera traps, which we installed during our first 5-day backpacking field expedition. Second, we used Wildlife Insights, which is a camera trapping software tool, and GIS to identify, process, and analyze our data. Finally, we took lessons learned to streamline the process of camera trapping studies so that smaller conservation organizations like the Center for Sustainability can expedite and increase the output of future conservation projects and impact policy. These images provide a visual representation of our methodology. So we navigated the landscape with the leadership of the local guides, crossing many rivers and sometimes hiking through storms. We identified ideal locations for camera trap placement based on wildlife indicators. And then we plugged the collected data into Wildlife Insights. So our camera traps recorded many endemic species, including the Philippine pangolin and the Palawan leopard cat, and other important species like the Asian palm civet. But for the most part, we saw a lot of images of monkeys. And then we transformed our processed images into graphs and maps, which display the significance of our data. So this graph provides an overview of the abundance for each reported species. Rodents, monkeys, and squirrels are the most abundant groups, and the least abundant groups are the Philippine porcupine, Asian small-clawed otter, and the leopard cat. These statistics provide valuable information by contributing to existing population data and preserving the presence of threatened species in the studies. Here's a simple map of our camera trap locations within the study site and a few important species and their IUCN status, their conservation status. In order to support Center for Sustainability's work and local and indigenous communities, we are in the process of making individual species extent maps to communicate our results. This graph shows the locations in our study site where the most number of different species were recorded. Sites 3, 7, and 9 are the sites with the highest amount of biodiversity, which will be explored further along in our research process to see how this might be linked to environmental factors like elevation, vegetation density, and proximity to Overall, our research clearly shows a high level of biodiversity in the forests of Solomon Peak, including many endemic species. The data we collected and the deliverables that we are still working on to display our findings will provide evidence that the Center for Sustainability continues to lobby for the establishment of conservation areas. Charlotte and I feel incredibly lucky to have had the experience to work and learn from local and Indigenous communities and our Center for Sustainability conservation leaders. We saw firsthand how camera trapping projects and collaborations with communities are critical for supporting local and global conservation efforts. We would love to thank our William faculty mentors, Sapana Lohani and John Small. We would also like to thank Erica, of course, for part of the our work, and our conservation mentors, Ray Esther Gabo and Abril Lambao. And then also, of course, our fellow student researchers, Jessica Ginorello and Iso Roddy. And now we have a message from Lowen from the student researchers that we.
Magandang araw, mabuhay! I am Jessica Jean Caranya Aurelia. And I am Ansel Lohani, and we are currently studying Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science at Palawan State University. Last summer, we did an internship at Center for Sustainability PH. It was an honestly life-changing experience. The whole expedition was an unforgettable experience. Beyond the reports and data, we connected with the real people and real issues. Getting to talk with the local community really opened our eyes and shifted our perspective and made us realize that conservation isn't just an abstract concept. It's a responsibility we offer those who will come after us. Paalam! Ingat! Hi, I'm Lei, conservation specialist at the Center for Sustainability PH, a women-led youth environmental nonprofit working towards conservation of the Philippines' last remaining forest. I have the privilege of coordinating the camera trapping research conducted here at Sultan Peak with the William and Mary team together with Palawan State University students. The research is not yet done. Actually, the local interns are continuing the study and have had several trips back already to retrieve SD cards and check the cameras. But even at this stage, the research is already showing the presence of mammals, including both threatened and endemic species, which is essential for strengthening the case for protecting the area. These findings help justify boundaries, identify key habitat areas, and provide concrete science-based evidence that supports our broader conservation planning and advocacy. Actually, today, the Center for Sustainability PH's team just finished presenting the results of our biodiversity assessment to the Tagbanwa community, and having this kind of evidence makes the discussion even more meaningful. It allows us to continue conversations with indigenous peoples and local governments in a way that's grounded in science, helping us advocate more effectively for Sultan Peak as a critical habitat. It's especially inspiring that the research team is made up of young women, showing how the next generation is stepping up for conservation. Their dedication reminds us why involving and supporting young people in protecting our forests and wildlife is so important and gives us hope that together we can secure a future for Sultan Peak and its incredible biodiversity. Thank you, and mabuhay from the Philippines.
But not least, we have Cy Strain Seymour, Manny Joyce, and Michael Tenman Riva, who's joining us via Zoom from CI Madagascar, who worked with the Moore Center for Science and Conservation International Madagascar, and with support from Dr. Nathan Kidwell to explore how utilizing low-cost water sensors can support community-led water monitoring in Madagascar. Hey everybody, I'm Mandy. Hey everyone, I'm Mandy.
I'm Sly.
And this is our project for the DIY water sensor monitoring for engaged communities in Madagascar. So what's happening in Madagascar? So there's Lake Palliser, which is
right there on the map, and it's typically used for recreation and for rice farming communities. But Madagascar has a lot of information, it's called lavicas, with the pictures here. And they create a lot of erosive forces, which transport sediment downhill and into the waterways, which lowers the quality of water for these communities. So Conservation International is a company that implements a restoration project to help mitigate this issue by planting vegetation, mainly trees in the watershed to stabilize the sediment. And this project was implemented with the focus of community engagement. So them with being involved with the establishment and implementation of this project.
So how the IIC is helping is the gap in knowledge is how the deforestation is contributing or not contributing to erosion. Ideally, with more trees, there will be less erosion, water quality will be better. But to actually test this, we have to monitor. And we're using turbidity, which is a measure of basically how see-through the water is. The problem is that commercial turbidity monitors are very expensive and inaccessible in the area. So the IIC in past years has helped design these DIY low-cost water sensors, which cost about $30 each to make, as opposed to $2. And the idea is that these are accessible to communities in Madagascar, so they can monitor. And what we're helping with is where to apply the sensors and how to analyze them. So to do this, we had 3 objectives. One was to identify priority locations for sensor deployment in the watershed. There's a map of the watershed there. Develop a plan for community engagement and involvement, and to generally improve the deployment process of the sensors.
This is a message from Michael, who's conservation partner with us, and he works with Conservation International, and he's having Madagascar and deploying the sensor.
Conservation work is charged across Madagascar, land use the marks of nature to be, where climate change intensifies droughts and heavy rains, and human pressures like charcoal production and sustainable farming will be eaten away at the forests. Conservation International works closely with local communities to restore forests, stabilize eroding sites, and protect the watershed that sustain life. However, to fully understand the impact of these restoration efforts on land and water, and to encourage local communities actively protect rather than degrade the natural resources, we need a reliable, continuous, and easy to collect data. To monitor these changes, the team developed low-cost do-it-yourself water system. With a working one, collecting baseline data is the first step before doing monitoring. So, field agent from CeCe, Madagascar, local resident from Sturman, install and maintain the sensor and to retrieve the data. Ensuring that this data collection continues safely, sustainably, and locally monitored. Meanwhile, understanding and analyzing data is key. Side notes for William and Mary have joined this exciting project to explore methods for data analysis and practical application for the results. Conservation work is charged across.
So our methods. So I used ArcGIS to take multiple environmental variables and assess them and how they
impact turbidity, such as forest cover, proximity to lava, which is that picture on the far left, sorry, and erosion risk factors, etc. And we also made poster materials to engage the community of why and how to be involved with our project. And then lastly, in this summer in Williamsburg, we took 2 sensors and deployed them in 3 different streams around Williamsburg that kind of mimic the topography of Madagascar to test the turbidity levels and just monitor fluctuation of turbidity throughout the summer according to different weather events.
So we made some posters for the community in Madagascar. There's some examples of what we did. Some are more meant to explain the importance of turbidity monitoring and why the reforestation will help water quality. And others are, the one on the right, are more meant to convey how to monitor. We collected turbidity locally in 3 streams around Williamsburg. These 2 sensors at each one, going for about a week each time. We also took samples to compare to commercial turbidity monitor to track the accuracy of the DIY sensor. And we collected weather data to see how weather is affecting the turbidity. And made a GIS map of the local.
So here is a sensor suitability map that I made for the Williamsburg watershed. The 3 green points are the 3 different locations where we tested the turbidity. And I used a similar approach to Lake Ultra, but I measured the impacts of elevation, forest cover, and proximity to waterways.
So here's a sample map or graph of the weather and the turbidity correlate. We collected this sort of data for all the sites which we did. Michael has been moving on to collecting baseline data in Madagascar, and over the winter and the rainy season, they'll start collecting more data about how this is sort of baseline data and where continue to data as they're collected.
So these are the results for the sensor suitability map. So one on the left is a sediment deposit crystalline, and the darker shades of brown are where we would find higher turbidity levels and more sediment. And then the map on the right is a sensor suitability map. So the lighter colors, those are the areas that you would want to place the sensor and they're most suitable for that. And these are all calculated according to factors such as elevation, erosion radius, proximity to lava flows, waterways, etc. And this is another map of the watershed. So in order to make change in Lake Ultra, we need to make change in the smaller 3 feet into it. So these are 8 different microsheds which within the bigger watershed to monitor these smaller streams and assess changes in. So our main key findings is that the southeastern region of the Lake Ultra watershed is the most suitable for sensor placement, and we want to test specifically in small upstream rivers. And to use these maps that I just showed you is honestly respective to the goals of the user, but to measure in and out of restoration sites or from higher level sediment risk.
Another part of our project was improving the sensor deployment process. So we were getting out there, figuring out the challenges and ways to mitigate them. So one of the key challenges we had was water getting in the turbidity movement. So we added a towel to improve that. The battery life is also a big challenge. So we're going for shorter times, so the battery doesn't through. Another challenge is the calibration. The process to make sure the monitor is accurate. So that's the area where it's not completed. As far as the weather and the data we collected, we found that the weather did have some effect on turbidity, but the site itself. So the implications for this, we're hoping that this will lead to accessible water monitoring. That will be simple to use and accessible for business. And we're hoping that this can make monitoring more accessible to different communities, so communities without being part of this.
Another implication is the easy community-based monitoring with our building process of why and how we deploy these sensors. And what this project means more broadly is that not every environment is uniform. So for the factors and variables that are used to assess those, some are very different because the environments and variables are very different respects to each other. So we just want to say thank you to all of our partners, specifically for this program. Michael, Jimmy, Myra, and Linda. This process. All reflection can be made from conservation and natural habitat.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be virtually here today to share a brief overview of the priceless planet coalition project with Livestock, mostly known as the Peace Project, and also to highlight the vital role of student-led research in advancement of conservation goals. At the heart of this initiative is Lake Alauta. It's Madagascar's largest lake and also a Ramsar site of international importance. This region is not only the island's main vast-growing area and resource for freshwater fish, but also a landscape deeply intertwined with local culture and livelihoods. Unfortunately, it's also one of the most vulnerable ecosystems of certification due to deforestation and land degradation. The lake has shrunk to just 30% size. With the PPC project, our goal is to restore the 5,000 acres of the network like vaccine and assisted network information. But restoration alone isn't enough. We must also monitor its effectiveness, especially on freshwater systems. And this is where our collaboration with students becomes so powerful. By developing and deploying low-cost, locally assembled turbine sensor, students from William and Mary University of Helena and the communities working with us to find changes in water quality in community. Their research is technically impressive. It all started with the first homemade water sensor by the first control customers of the university. This was the stage 3 in Madagascar in the village of Three. It was then followed by the improvement of this device by another cohort of students, but this time with a direct cost for human very fun, especially in the spent weeks in this purpose. Currently, we are lucky to have the contribution of Mandy and CeCe who help us choose the best solution. Mandy and CeCe, thank you for helping us collect the best data about providing us the best locations to deploy sensor based on the research that you have conducted, looking at all the factors that might influence water quality. This partnership between CI and William and Mary University exemplifies how science, community, and education can come together to create lasting impact. By empowering the next generation of conservation leaders, we're not just restoring landscapes, we're restoring hope. So thank you so much, and wishing you all the best for the future.
Great. Well, as you can see, the 2025 students in the Conservation Research Program have done some amazing work alongside conservation partners and faculty. We'll be continuing to tell these stories this afternoon